Hello, listener. So, you like scary movies? Well, it is a creepy night, and with all those crazy lunatics out there, well, you really shouldn't be alone. Ooh, you look so freaked out right now. Now I suggest you listen very carefully. Subscribe to ClassHorrorCast, or I'll gut you like a fish. Enjoy the show. I'll be watching.
Hey everyone, welcome back to ClassHorrorCast. I'm your host Aran, and on this week's episode, I get to have a chat with Ted Nicolaou, the man behind cult classics such as Subspecies, TerrorVision Ghoulies, and much more. He tells all about his experiences shooting in Romania, India, and many more incredible locations. Ted has also worked on the likes of Tourist Trap and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and has some great stories. We get into what to expect from Subspecies 5 Blood Rise, and could potentially expect to see it next year. You won't want to miss this fantastic conversation. Can you remember your first horror movie or your introduction into horror?
I would say my introduction into horror was basically Saturday and Friday nights on television. I grew up in Dallas, and there was a Fort Worth independent television station that had a horror host who was also the cartoon host in the afternoon. But late night Friday and Saturday, they'd play the old Universal horror films. So my first introduction was basically, Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman. And then about that same time came the Twilight Zone on Friday nights. So, the weekends, my parents would go out, and it was sort of like the perfect night for a little kid who loved horror films.
And when you first saw that, then would you say you were a fan from that point, or did it scare you, or?
You know what? Those movies didn't frighten me like on some visceral level where I felt threatened, but they inspired a sense of awe, I think, which was even more important, and I think is an important aspect of horror films. Just the partially it was the expressionistic production design of those Universal films from the influence of German production designers who were coming over and cinematographers who were coming over to avoid rise of Nazism. So for me, it was more about just the imagination and the sense of something other in the world, because, at that age, you do have a serious sense of there's something more mysterious going on than what you can see. Yeah.
And growing up then, were you a collector of anything, when you get into your teens or whatever?
No, I've never been a collector. My brain doesn't really work like that. I sort of, I live pretty, very simply and don't really like to collect a lot of stuff around me. I was more of a collector of ideas and not like a steel trap memory sort of a brain, but more of fill my head with ideas and it all swims around into this kind of weird brew that eventually comes out in some creative way.
I love the idea, like you said, about living maybe more simply, and I always try and get away from collecting, and because I have such a huge obsession with film and horror, I find it so hard to stay away from wanting movie props and different things. And then I'll try and have a clear out, and then I feel like I end up back in the same spot again. And I always wonder what that is that makes somebody one way or the other.
Yeah, there's some sort of obsession with possessing something or having it near you. And I go to horror conventions and, sign and see that, that people really do love to have a collection of autographs or still photographs. And I'm not that my brain just doesn't work that way. I collect stuff, or household items or, interesting drink glasses and decorative things, but then the ones that last in our house kind of last forever, and then the rest kind of go into the garage, and then we have garage sales every once in a while. So our garage is forever cleared out and then filling up again with a bunch of crap, you know.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think some of it as well. I had a couple of conversations recently with different people. I'd done an interview a while back with a guy called Tal Zimmerman, who had done a documentary for Shudder called Why Horror, and he basically just explores the idea of why different people are drawn to the genre and X, Y, and Z. And you know, we were talking about collecting, and sometimes I feel like maybe to a degree when I have this stuff, I feel like and sometimes I feel bad when I actually think about it. You know, you meet somebody who maybe is not as into movies or not as into horror, and I kind of feel like I'm like being like a universal tour guide, and I'm being like, so this still is from X, Y, and Z, and see this thing, this is from the movie part 4 of this guy, and I just kind of spin off these yarns for people.
And does it keep them entertained?
I think some people, yeah, but then some people are just like, yeah, I'm good, I've no interest.
Yeah.
So growing up, obviously you get into horror. So through your teens, then at what point did you, I guess, make the switch to thinking, you know, I actually want to do this and be part of this world?
Well, as I was growing up, after the TV kind of introduction to horror films, on Saturday afternoons, my father would take me to like the afternoon matinees at the local cinemas, and he loved science fiction films, and so we saw kind of all the 1950s monster movies, and Forbidden Planet was one of his favorites. But he was a psychoanalyst, and the career path they kind of were hoping for me was to be a doctor or something. So I went to the University of Texas in Austin and set out in kind of a pre-med path, but at some point, this was the 60s, and at some point a friend turned me onto some LSD and took me to see a movie called Juliet of the Spirits, a Fellini film. And it blew my mind. The idea, I was a musician and a folk singer and a rock and roller and all of that, and a writer. And seeing that movie made me realize that films could let you deal with music, storytelling, visuals, the things that I loved. And seeing that film, and then like a couple of weeks later, the Seventh Seal, the Ingmar Bergman film, kind of clinched it for me, and I switched from pre-med into the film department at University of Texas, and I was just nonstop movie making from there on out.
And what was your first, what would you consider your first credit, I guess, or involvement in something where you were like, okay, this is going to be where I go?
Among the student films that I made was a kind of apocalyptic black comedy called Southern Hospitality, about a family whose home gets taken over by flood refugees after it's been raining for 40 days and 40 nights. And it went out on the kind of like, university festival circuit and got an Academy Award nomination for Student Academy Awards, and made me realize that maybe I could actually make a career of it. And then shortly after, I got hired to be the sound recordist on Tobe Hooper's original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And so that was really my first major job in the film business. And that was in Austin, and super independent film, but the cinematographer on the film, Daniel Pearl, was also my best friend in film school too. So we both knew that we kind of had this path before us.
And I feel like that's something I actually had a chat with Daniel a couple of months back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Another super knowledgeable guy like yourself. I feel like, though,
Yeah.
that the fact that you worked on that film, I don't think gets mentioned enough. I mean, before, I guess, I would imagine that a lot of people would consider your breakout maybe TerrorVision or something like that. At least now, looking back. But I mean, you were involved in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which, I mean, at the time, you know, nobody could have known that it was going to become such a huge.
That's for sure.
Yeah, like it's crazy. I mean, you were involved in Tourist Trap as well, if I'm right.
Yeah, I was the editor of Tourist Trap. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, how did that? I guess my question would be more so. Back then, while you were in those positions, did it feel as huge as it does now? Like, I feel like when I read those names now, I'm like, you know, goddamn, like some of your first credits were, you know, Tourist Trap, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which seems crazy.
You know, I was studying to be a director, and I knew I wanted to write and direct, even before Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So for me, the sound position on Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a huge thing, and allowed me to kind of be involved in a film production, you know, from the inside. And I guess it's not really mentioned, my participation in Chainsaw all that often when people talk about me, because really I was just the sound recordist. So my job was kind of to find the best place to put the microphones and record the cleanest dialogue that I could and stay out of everybody's way. So you know, whereas Daniel's work is evident on the screen and you can see kind of his style and where he was going from that film, for me that Chainsaw was really more of a technical job, but it made me see that, you know, maybe more movies could be made in Texas. And we tried. I was with a little company of 5 people. We tried a lot to raise money after Chainsaw Massacre, but never were successful. And so when I came out to Los Angeles, a lot of my friends had preceded me out here, and offered me a job on a film called Roar, which was a Tippi Hedren film that her husband was directing, that's kind of known as like one of the most what the fuck movies that ever was made, because it involved like 100 lions and tigers and acting with people, and it was an insane experience. And from that, the next film I did was Tourist Trap. I got hired to edit Tourist Trap, and I guess Tourist Trap was really kind of the beginning of my Los Angeles career in horror films, because it was directed by David Schmoller, who was another film school associate of mine, and produced by Charles Band, who at the time I didn't really know him, but went on to become a really good friend, and I edited a number of films that he directed. And that's how I eventually got my shot at directing TerrorVision.
So you meet him through the experience with Tourist Trap, is it? Is that like your first?
Yeah. Tourist Trap, he had a little office on Hollywood Boulevard. I mean, on Santa Monica Boulevard, and a couple of cutting rooms and a little warehouse area and his office. And so it was basically a very small company, and he was around all the time. In those days, he was always trying to duck people who he owed money to. So he didn't really, he wasn't quite as present as he was later on, but he was always there, and he loved movies, and he, you know, so the working for him was kind of a joy, because he really just was very positive about everything.
Did you guys basically then hit it off nearly immediately?
I was a little bit kind of standoffish from him at first because I didn't really know him very well. In the next few years, as I became closer to him and edited some of his films, like Trancers and God, so many films. We became friendlier and friendlier, until eventually we're very comfortable with each other. He was not an easy person to get to know back in the original days of Tourist Trap.
And okay, so you kind of build a relationship with him, and then TerrorVision comes along. Now I know you had directed some things before then, but I guess that was like what a lot of people would see like your big break, I guess.
Definitely.
How was the I guess the pressure and just the whole build up to, obviously you said that that's what you wanted to do ultimately, but did you feel anxiety when it actually came true?
I love directing so much, and I did it pretty gracefully through college, that when I step on the set, I do not feel anxiety. The only anxiety really is about the schedule and the amount of work to do on any given day. I do, however, feel terror upon embarking on a film before all the pieces come together. There's like this terrible anxiety of how is this ever going to work out, and it's only step by step that once I have a production designer, a cinematographer, and especially once the cast comes together, that the anxiety kind of goes away, and you realize that really my job is just to kind of help everybody do the best work that they can do, and to kind of guide people along the same track for the movie. So it's really, and that part of it is really interesting and challenging and fun to me. So all my anxiety comes way in pre-production, and then the actual making of the movie is only the terror of can we make each day.
Mm-hmm. Is it, I'm not sure if this is true or not, or I'm not sure if you even know, is it true that the artwork for that movie was made before there was like a solid story?
No, it's not. The artwork for that film, basically, I wrote the script, and then we sent it to the Italians who were the production crew of the film. Giovanni Nautalucci, the production designer, came to Los Angeles for some meetings, and he and I talked a lot about the look of the film and looked at tons of booklets of locations, like houses in the San Fernando Valley, kind of porn houses, and talked about the look of the film. And the script itself was was very similar to the ultimate kind of style of the film. So he very intelligently kind of grasped the mood of the story. And from our meetings in Los Angeles, he went back to Italy and went to work on the sets. And his crew did the erotic art that ended up on the walls. And he basically came up with that entire set. And I knew nothing about what it was going to be. Didn't send me, maybe they sent me a few photographs, but didn't really, it was like in mid-construction. So when I landed in Rome and went out to the studio and stepped onto the sets for the first time, it like took my breath away, because they were so far beyond anything that I could have imagined, So he really kind of, every step of the way on that film, somebody kind of outdid the person before them, and everybody plussed it time and time again till it became kind of the crazy cartoon that it is.
Yeah, and like, and it's a conversation I seem to have over and over again with people, and I don't know if you'll. I'll be interested to hear your take on this, if you agree or disagree. A lot of your body of work, from TerrorVision, Subspecies, the subsequent sequels, so many things that I can pick out, even up to Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys. There's a feeling, I think, that those movies have, and I think every time, at least for me, and I know some people within the circles will agree, when you revisit a movie like that, there's a feeling or a magic about that, and about, maybe, I guess, in the era of, videotapes and stuff like that, there's I don't know, it feels like there's a certain magic there that maybe has been somewhat lost in recent times.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. When I look back at my movies too, there's something a little bit hypnotic about them, and I'm not sure if it's the combination of the subject matter, the style of the cinematography, and the music. Obviously, the acting has a lot to do with it, but they're rewatchable, I think, and to me that was always the indication of a great movie. Not that my movies are great movies, but the art films that I loved, or Martin Scorsese films that I can watch, dozens of times and still enjoy them. A lot of it has to do with the craft that went into the making of the film. And I feel like, if anything, the films that I made, I approached them really seriously, because I didn't really set out to only make horror films in my life. I really set out to have a career making movies of many different genres, but ended up kind of, in the world of horror, and that's kind of where I made the most of my work. And I think what I love about filmmaking is actually shooting on location or shooting in real places. I'm not all that fond of CG created worlds and all the things that are happening today, and everything just seems way too busy visually and sound wise. And for me, there's something really great about a very kind of sparse soundtrack, where each sound kind of brings meaning to the story, and visuals that have a really interesting kind of architectural and geometric composition to them. So I guess that's kind of my love of movies is great, but my love of shooting on location kind of is a lot greater than what I see in a lot of films these days.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, Dune has released recently and stuff like that, and I know it's making a lot of noise, and not to knock that movie, but just to, I guess, as an example, it feels like such an event, and like you said, there's so much, CG and different things. I don't know, maybe that's what I can't really pinpoint exactly what I mean, but I've had the conversation so many times, and so many people agree that there's just like a magic that sometimes seems not there. And it's interesting to hear you say that, you always took your movies seriously. And I think that really shines through regardless of the subject matter. And even if there is some, satire and comedy sprinkled in there, you can tell it was done passionately, and it wasn't just kind of thrown together, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I take the craft seriously, and because I was an editor for so long, I sort of know that the process doesn't ever end until the last bit of editing is done, and I sort of rely on editing to save me when I've made some mistakes. You inevitably screw up on the set, but there's something in editing. And if the editor finds the perfect rhythm for a scene or for the movie and for the actors, everything works together so intricately that I can't explain it, but I know that there's like, I did a lot of little documentaries for the Disney studios, like behind the scenes kind of documentaries, and the same thing happens there. Where if you find the perfect music and the rhythm of the editing and the rhythm of the sound, it all works together. It can be very, very hypnotic and rewatchable.
Yeah, I definitely feel that, and you had mentioned as well, your love for shooting on location and stuff. So how was it then when when you went to make Subspecies?
Subspecies was made like 1990, the very first one, and Charlie said, came to me and said, "Hey, I have this script, Subspecies, and it's a vampire story, and I've got this guy who says we could go to Romania and shoot it there, and it'd be super cheap and great locations. You want to go check it out?" And so I'm always up for sort of an adventure that's going to involve some free travel, first of all. So I went to Romania for a week to scout locations. And at that time, this was like the summer or springtime, like June maybe, like 6 months after the revolution. And Romania was so just desperately poor and gray and really a sad place of people that were kind of confused about what the future was going to bring. But I met Vlad Paunescu, who was going to be the cinematographer, and his girlfriend at the time, who's now his wife, Juana, who was going to be the costume designer. And basically, they had their eyes on the future. They were super cool people, and he didn't speak any English, and she spoke enough English that she could kind of speak between us. And we traveled up and down Romania looking at castles and various villages and locations to see what was possible to shoot there. And in that week, we became really tight, and I ended up really loving them a lot. Came back to Los Angeles and told Charlie, yeah, I think we could do this. And so then I went back in September to basically, hold on, here's some scam phone call. Went back in September to start pre-production, and they put me up in Ceausescu's summer palace on Lake Snagov, this conference center with like 12 hotel rooms and, in the middle of the forest on the edge of the lake. I was the only person there except for the couple of people that worked there. And it was a very spooky, crazy, weird place. And I got the idea that maybe Charlie had sacrificed me to vampires, and I was expecting vampires to come out of the forest. And it got very weird and dark for me for a period until but the whole time we were doing pre-production and casting Romanian actors, and everything was extremely difficult because, people didn't have cars necessarily, or they were always late, or somebody would always kind of fuck up in the planning, and there wasn't food to be had, and you couldn't get bottled water, and everything was so screwy. But my friendship with Vlad and Juana sort of kept me sane, and they would invite me over to their apartment, and we'd drink wine and talk and laugh, and it sort of made everything more human for me and kind of kept me grounded, because the locations that I was being presented were phenomenal, and the idea that I'd be able to shoot in these places was so exciting. And then finally, when the actors started arriving, it was the same thing. It's like, okay, now I've got my cast. Now we can actually make a movie. The difficult part on Subspecies was basically Anders Hove, who played Radu, who's a Danish actor and a really magnificent human being, and Michael Watson, who played Stefan, his brother, loved wine. and the wine was like $1 a bottle, and it was pretty good. And so there was way too much drunkenness on the set and at night in the hotels. And so the film became partially a matter of keeping the Romanian crew kind of focused, because sometimes they weren't getting paid, and so they were going on strike constantly. And Vlad was kind of my anchor and kept pushing the movie forward. But also then trying to manage the actors who were, because we were supposed to be there 3 weeks and we ended up being there, 2 or 3 months. They were going crazy and hating the experience and getting too drunk and, threatening my life. And it was just a completely insane. But I was like, we have to bring this film in to completion because the locations are too cool, and Anis's performance as Radu is so incredible. So that movie was a super challenge, and I kind of kept a journal on that film. Every night I'd go back to my hotel room and just kind of write what happened that day and kind of turn it into comedy for myself just to stay sane. And it worked, and so in the end, we got out of the country just before Christmas time and put the film together. And for its flaws, of which there are, of course, many, Paramount really loved it and requested some sequels. And so I was able to go back and ended up, working in Romania for like 10 years or so every year.
Yeah, just hearing you talk about your experience and just the whole thing, that movie and subsequent sequels are very highly regarded, and especially within the horror community, from just that gothic atmosphere throughout, the castle, the rocky terrain, all the different things within the world, the effects, the score, the performances, everything just seemed to, I don't know, again, that's another movie that I would say, like, it just had this look or this magic about it that, like you said, there may be some flaws and different things and whatever, you might have been hindered by certain situations and problems, but all in all, like, I feel like that it's a really interesting take on a vampire story. And I mean, I feel like you guys couldn't have pulled it off any better. Did you feel like that going back to the States, or was it just kind of like, oh, geez, I don't really know what I've got here, but,
Let me think about that. I knew, there were some problems near the end of the film, the first film, where Michael Watson, just was ready to get the hell out of the country and was going a little bit nuts. There was another problem where Laura Tate, who plays Stefan's love interest, she woke up in her hotel room to find somebody standing over her bed and freaked out and left the country like a week or so before we were finished shooting.
Oh, wow.
And so we had to rush around and hire a local girl to be her stand-in and cut this poor girl's beautiful long hair off to match Laura Tate's, and kind of finish the rest of the film without Laura. And if you look at the film closely, like when the three students kind of visit the old witch, and the old witch kind of tells them the story of the vampires, she puts a mask on Laura Tate's face. Like that's one of the scenes where we didn't have Laura to shoot with, and some scenes in the car. So there were a lot of problems. And when I went back, I felt kind of like beat up and bruised from the actual making of the film. I knew that we had some really beautiful material to work with, and so once we started editing, it was obvious that it was going to work out okay. But yeah, when when you finish the film, you think you've done the most brilliant thing ever, and then when you start editing it, you go, oh, fuck, I really didn't do this very well, did I? So it's like this roller coaster of ego and like self chastisement, So I didn't really know that we had something great. I knew that we had some really beautiful moments. And for Subspecies 2 and 3, when we went back, I called Anas and said, let's make a deal. No drinking on the set, no drinking when we're shooting. And in the evening when we're taking off your makeup, I'll come in and sit with you and we'll have a bottle of wine together, and we made that deal and he stuck to it. And we've become really, really close friends over the years. So for me, making a movie is partially about making the movie, but then there's this whole village around you. And I've always been kind of interested in what's going on in the village too, and kind of the crew gossip. And sometimes it gets to be too much to keep all of that in your head and make the movie. But for me, it's all, I feel like I'm like the daddy of the people on the set, and I've got to watch over everything,
Yeah. And so you get back and you edit the film and whatever, and it's well received. They want sequels. So was there any sort of guidelines for where the story needed to go from there, or did you just have to pick up from scratch?
I for some reason, I got it in my head that I just wanted to take the sequel, and Charlie, wanted to do 2 sequels back to back, because that would, like save him money in the long run. So I got it in my head that the sequel would pick up immediately where the first film left off, and subsequently each sequel kind of maintains that story progress. And so that was the idea that I started with, and then I just sat down and started writing this incredibly long screenplay, like 180 pages or so, that would encompass both number 2 and 3.
Did that make it? Was that something that you actively done, kind of making a long, continuous screenplay? Did that make it more difficult while shooting, or was it easier because you were kind of shooting a super long movie in a way?
We kind of acted like we were shooting a super long movie, and because the locations are spread out, across Transylvania, several different cities, and out in the wilderness, we basically, had to break down that long screenplay according to the locations and the crew travel. So yeah, it was like one massively long film and one kind of traveling circus of actors and Romanian crew, and it was like it had its problems, and Vlad and I kind of got into a bit of a fight at the beginning of the film, but once things settled down, it's like there's nothing more cool than being able to travel across a country like Romania was back in those days, where it was still you could leave the city and out in the country you travel 125 years back in time, and it was so, there's like something about going to a country that's not yours and what you think of as beautiful. I mean, I find like kind of crumbling old architecture really beautiful, and the cities were full of like turn of the century kind of architecture and earlier 1800s architecture that was just like had fallen to ruin in a way, but still had this kind of decrepit beauty. So for me, every place we went just held magic, and every place, even as it was sad and poor. Poverty was really evident. Everything just held some kind of promise to me. Like in the cities, you just knew that behind all of these doors there were people with dreams and hopes, and somehow it was going to. They were coming out of this long period of just gray communism, and over the next couple of years, you saw the kind of gigantic bump in the population of young people due to Ceausescu's kind of anti-birth control rules. Suddenly it was like the 60s in the United States, in Romania, where youth were kind of taking over and young ideas were taking over. So for me, it was like going back and revisiting it again and again, and getting to travel more across the country were really an incredible experience.
Yeah, and you talk a lot about, I guess, the atmosphere, the locations, the buildings, the architecture. How much of, designing these sets, obviously you've got a great foundation to work from, but a lot of people, including myself, would say that just how the movies looked and how they were set up, some of the interiors, different things. Did you have an exact vision of what you wanted or didn't want?
I had a vision of what I wanted. I knew the locations from my, earlier location scouts across the country. Some of the castle interiors in all three of the first three films were on a soundstage, actually, at Booft Studios, the kind of formerly National Film Studios that had kind of gone to seed. So the throne room and the coffin room and Mummy's crypt were all on a soundstage. And basically the production designer of numbers 2 and 3 was Radu Korchova, a Romanian, and we talked a lot, and they would show me props, and so I was kind of involved in the overall look of things, but I like to let production designers kind of go there with their own instincts too. So, the churches and all of that, we didn't have to do anything to, and the exteriors of buildings are all just the exteriors. So in a way, the production design went mostly to props, and in number 1, the masks for the village ceremony, but really the movies were so inexpensive because what was in front of the camera was so spectacular to begin with.
Yeah, I can see that. And so the third movie comes out in 94, 95, I want to say.
Let's see, we shot it in 92. I bet 93 and 94 probably were the 2 and 3. Oh, and the fourth movie you said?
No, so we get to the third movie releases, and then just before we get off the topic, I guess, of Subspecies, there's a gap then of maybe how many years? There was a little bit of a gap there, wasn't there, in between?
Yeah, probably 97, I bet, was number 4. Yeah, there was a gap because Charlie, let me think, the actual timeline of everything. We did the Subspecies films, and then he kind of got sidetracked into Moonbeam Entertainment, which was making like fantasy films for children and family movies. And so I got kind of involved in making a few of those, like Dragon World and Magic in the Mirror. And so those kind of took precedence for a while because Paramount was really hot for those movies, and Paramount was distributing them on VHS. So then we got back to Subspecies again after kind of that period. And I think what happened was his deal with Paramount kind of fell apart for various reasons. And then he went independent again and started producing films for his own company, Full Moon Entertainment. And what happened was, I think he was aware that of the movies that he was known for, Puppet Master had a big audience and Subspecies had a big audience, and so he decided that maybe to do another Subspecies was beneficial to kind of getting his new company established.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those franchises where honestly, I don't see too many negative, I guess, reviews from people who love the genre, who love film. It seems like a quite well received franchise.
That's good to hear from across the Atlantic Ocean. The number 4 for me was kind of the I don't know, like the bastard child of the franchise, because we didn't have the money that we had on the earlier films. We couldn't afford to travel to the locations that we normally went to, and so we had to find interesting locations in and around Bucharest. So, and in some ways, the movie shows a little bit cheaper, but I feel like part of the wonderful aspect of those movies too, and we haven't talked about that, is the Romanian cast. The Romanian actors were so amazingly well trained, and just have so much character that they brought another level of reality to the films, and they played a much bigger part in Subspecies 4 than they did in the earlier films.
Yeah. So, you have your gap here. The 4th movie comes out, and then I guess not to get off the topic again. So that kind of goes away again, and from there, then where did you want to go from that point? Like you've done 4 movies here in like a what I would consider a really successful franchise. You had been working in between all these as well. I know you had said you went on to do like Dragon World and some stuff. And where did you see yourself going, and where did you want to go from that point then?
That began kind of like a more difficult period where I wasn't working as much. I had gotten used to doing 2 or 3 movies in a year, and when Charlie's company kind of ran into financial difficulties, I went back to Romania and did Magic in the Mirror and Leapin' Leprechauns, some more children's films. But then it was very quiet for a period. And we didn't talk about Vampire Journals, but that was a part of the kind of the near the end of Charlie's run of vampire films. So then, let's see, around that time, got very quiet. I wrote scripts and tried to get movies, tried to get financing for films, but nothing really was happening. And I ended up kind of going back to editing just to make money again. And a friend's company, the people who had done the marketing and the trailers and promotion for TerrorVision, they had a company that was producing like behind-the-scenes documentaries and DVD bonus features for Disney films. Mm-hmm. So I went and started working for them for a while, and just to keep being able to make movies and put images together with music and tell stories. So I did that for a long time, and kept wishing for a movie, and I got somebody called me to do Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys. And though I really do not like puppet movies and don't like working with puppets, I took it just because it was another movie to make.
Were you excited at all by that title, or?
I was less excited than I would be about some other ideas. The script that I got that Courtney Joyner had written, I felt like needed some work. So I was able to rewrite the script, and for better or worse, I don't know. Some people hate that movie so much. I kind of injected some comedy into the story. It was not produced by Charlie Band. He owed Sci-Fi Channel the movie because I guess they had already paid for it. So he licensed the rights to another company to produce it. And they were shooting in, Jesus, where do we shoot that film? Anyway, it was not a happy experience. You know, they cast Corey Feldman, which was kind of a miscast. They cast Sylvia Suvadova, who's an incredible actress, but totally miscast. And I should have rewritten the script immediately once we had her on board. So it was a difficult experience, and was fighting with to get what I needed to make the film. And had a cinematographer that didn't like me, so I was not used to that, because for me the relationship between me and the cinematographer was always kind of as important as the relationship between me and the actors. So that was a truly bizarre experience.
Yeah, and there does seem to be some, I guess, some stories surrounding that movie, kind of alluding, I guess, to what you were talking about. Was there ever any point in time where you considered maybe just stepping away from the project, or just like, I can't do this?
No. Once I'm committed to it and there to walk away from it would be, and I really wanted to direct a film again, So I did the best I could with what I had to work with. And not be a quitter,
Yeah, I guess I don't mean in that sense. I just meant more so, from, I guess, from the aspect of, I can't work like this, but it never really, it's just something you want to do what you want to do.
Yeah, you want to do it more than you think you can't do it. You know what I mean? So it was like really, and plus because people assure you, it's going to be great. You're going to enjoy it. So you don't realize what a shit show you're stepping into until you get off the plane and start looking at locations. And I was so used to the wealth of incredible locations in Romania that it just wasn't the same, Yeah. And then there was a film that I did. I don't know if you probably don't even know it, because it never got completed. Spent like 2 years of my life on a movie that we shot in India, or right around that time, also like 2001. That starred Sean Young and Rutger Hauer, and was like a crazy production that took forever in pre-production at a place called the Ramoji Film City in Hyderabad, India, and it was like just the most mismanaged from a production standpoint production ever. The AD quit like halfway into the shooting, and so I had to AD and direct and effects. It's just a complete nightmare. The Indians fired the producer who hired me, and then eventually just never finished the film once we came back to the States. So that was like a major 2-year kind of real low point of my life, and right after that came the Puppet Master versus Demonic Toys. So that's another reason why I took it.
And how did you pull yourself back out of that situation? And, you know, when you feel like everything's getting on top of you like that, is it just your love for the craft that kind of keeps you going?
Yeah, I think it is. It's like your love for the craft, your love for just sitting down and spinning a story, you know, in front of your computer and writing a movie. You know, I just wrote screenplays, and that's sort of the solace, I guess, of, you know, licking your wounds is writing screenplays and, you know, having this vision that, you know, maybe another film will come my way. You know, it's a kooky sort of a dreamer's life, you know, and I've been super lucky that I had that big run of movies, and super really lucky that in the time that I didn't have those movies, I had this work for Disney, and they liked the work that I was doing. So I got to do, you know, some really interesting projects and stories about Walt Disney and the artists that worked for him and their families, and got to dig into the Disney archives and look at story notes from you know, as far back as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and see kind of Walt Disney's creative process. So even though it wasn't making features, it was telling stories and digging into a world that was completely foreign to me, and choosing music and working with camera people. And I got to do a documentary about the friendship between Salvador Dali and Walt Disney in the 40s. And so my creative side was still engaged. You know, it wasn't doing exactly what I wanted to do, but I was making enough money that my family could survive, and that at that time was the most important thing. And writing scripts and, you know, trying to get them off the ground. So all of that just kept me sane, at least, or as sane as I can be.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, like you said, it's not necessarily exactly what you wanted to do, but I mean, you could probably add different things to your tool belt, and, you know, like you said, you're keeping yourself engaged, ready for the next time to strike when the iron is hot.
Yeah, exactly.
You had mentioned that, you know, so you're doing this, you're doing these Disney documentaries, you're doing these behind the scenes things, special features for movies. You're writing your own scripts, you're shopping scripts, I would imagine, or whatever. How, I guess, your creative process, do you just see something in everyday life and kind of get an idea, or is it something where you actively sit down and write, I'm going to try and write a, you know, a vampire story, I'm going to try write this story or that story?
Basically, yeah, I've got to sit down and really think. I've got, you know, a whole lot of kind of ideas jotted down, you know, in various files on my computer, and some kind of pan out and some don't pan out, and some are based on my experiences, like in Romania as an American, kind of fish out of water in a country like Romania. Some were kind of based on my desire to get back at certain events that happened to me, and kind of stories kind of grew out of that. And then, you know, I was writing I got kind of put onto a movie by a friend of mine, Roberto Bessi, who was the Italian producer of TerrorVision. We stayed in touch over the years, and he was involved with this yoga and meditation group called Ananda that have you know, like spiritual communities around the world, and they wanted to do a documentary, and so I got hired to do a documentary for their communities and for their guru. And so I spent like a year and a half or so kind of in this other world of yogis, and meditators and very smart people, but off on the spiritual path that they sort of from the 60s sort of split off. We were all part of the 60s and part of that counterculture, and some went spiritual and others went different ways. So I had a really good time kind of working with them, but at the same time I was like, this is all too much goody stuff. So I think I better write a horror film just to kind of get the evil out. And so I wrote a ghost story during that period, so the ideas come from God knows where. You're just so lucky to just find some idea floating in the air and kind of pull at it and see if it evolves and where it leads you.
Would you say so I had some fans of yours reach out to me and kind of ask for people who are either aspiring directors or writers and things like that. A couple of people had said to me they get an idea and they feel like they can take it to a certain point, and then it kind of just never gets any further, and then they kind of get a kernel for another idea, and it's a similar situation. Would you say that putting yourself in all those different positions in different countries, from India to Romania, different places in the States, with different types of people, does that help maybe, like you said, bring you back maybe to a story, or go, oh, you know what, I actually have got an even better idea?
I think like first part of your question, I think when you start writing a script and you come against some point in the story where it's not working out, sometimes I think you have to go back to the beginning and see where it went wrong or what you're missing. I mean, there's like a lot of different theories of storytelling, and I think if you go back and you really need to, I mean, every scene of a script has to kind of draw people in and make them wonder what's the next step of the story. And sometimes when things don't pan out, it's because something went wrong early on in the story. I think, writing also because it's about people and creating characters, and I think you have to set out figuring out why your story would appeal to anybody to begin with, and what is it that makes this story something that people are going to be fascinated by. I think that's got to be almost your first question. I spent like part of the lockdown writing a script just because I wanted to write it, and I wrote it for two actors, Anders Hove, the Danish actor who plays Radu, and Jan Hajduk, who's the Romanian actor who played Lieutenant Marin in the Subspecies films. And we had been talking about doing a film forever and ever and ever, and finally I thought, well, here's an idea, and it's so odd. I spent a long time writing the script, and I love the story, but it's about two fathers whose the Romanian daughter and Danish rich son got married against the father's will, and the kids died. Now the fathers have to scatter the ashes of their children across Romania. And it's so it's like a road trip spiritual adventure. And I wrote it because I just love the idea of it. And I love the idea that the Romanian, being an Orthodox, can't scatter the ashes of his daughter who had become a Buddhist, because it's a sin. And so he's trying to figure out a way around God's rules. And so it's a very odd kind of spiritual road movie. And I was like, what the fuck was I thinking? I wrote this script. I really love it. But who in the world, where's the audience for this film? It's like an art house comedy. So yeah, you have to really think about what is your audience and what why is this movie going to be attractive to anybody? And then you have to know people. You got to really love and understand people to write characters.
Mm-hmm. Is there a movie within an existing franchise or an existing character that you'd love to either, write and direct an installment for or work on it?
Let me think about that. Within an existing franchise, I'm trying to think what franchises are really appealing to me, and just the idea of calling a movie a franchise kind of just makes my skin crawl, because it turns what should be cinema and just a unique storytelling into some business venture.
Yeah, it sounds very commercial.
It sounds horrifying, man. I suppose I would like to do I would like to do an Aliens film. Would be cool, and Blade Runner. I think are both great. If you have to call them franchises, I guess you do, because they have become. But yeah, those are films that really kind of appeal to my sense of awe and mystery.
Yeah, I could see that. What are some of your favorite horror movies?
You know what? Horror movies of recent vintage are not really doing it for me. I guess I would have to say Eyes Without a Face is, like, to me, like one of the most poetic horror films ever made. For sure, Rosemary's Baby, Repulsion, for sure, The Exorcist. Don't Look Back, Nicholas Roeg's film. Incredible horror film with like one of the most shocking endings ever. Psycho. I'm sort of like old school in terms of I like storytelling that goes along with movies. I love The Orphanage, and it's weird because that film is so good, and really you can't find it in the States. I don't know if the company that
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's a very hard film to come across.
It was like had an emotional component, and I think that's the other thing that I learned from working on reading Walt Disney's story notes. That emotion is a humongous part of movie storytelling, and because you're trying to hook the audience's emotions and take them along with the character's emotions. And so emotion is it's a hard concept to grasp in a way. It took me a really long time to really kind of understand emotions even, but to me that's like it has to be an important component in writing a script.
Have you got a script or a story that has yet to be made that sticks out in your mind as one you really want to do?
Yeah, the one I was just describing to you, the Spiritual Road movie, could be done so cheaply, and it's something that I really would love to do. I have a ghost story that set like in the Caddo Lake, this very mysterious kind of swampland of the east border of Texas, that I've been trying to get the money for a few years now, and a movie called the Cheeseburger Manifesto, that is the fish out of water American in Romania turn of the right after the revolution. That is a incredible comedy that could be made. All those movies they just kind of pile up in your computer, and because I don't really have adequate representation or anything like that, it's like I'm just a person trying to get movies made through the people that I know.
Is there any major differences, or how was your experience making movies in, say, the States versus somewhere like India or Romania or these different places? Like, you seem to have been, in vast parts of the world. Is there any huge discrepancies between, one versus the other?
Yeah. In the States, there's like this very organized kind of cinema community, and the jobs on the set are very, very strictly kind of separated. In Romania, when I first got there, it was a little bit more chaotic, and the director of photography kind of helped to run the set. And because nobody could get fired from their positions in the communist days, there was like an incredible kind of lackadaisical attitude on set, and people just wasting time. And it took a few years of working in Romania, and it took the director of photography, Adolfo Bartoli, the Italian director of photography who worked for Charlie a lot, to come over there and kind of teach them how to work in a more Western way. And part of that was because they just didn't have the equipment, and part of that was because the mentality was different. But they eventually kind of learned, and now, you know, shooting in Romania is pretty much the same as shooting in the States, except for the language. Mm-hmm. In India, I found, you know, there's like between a director and a cinematographer and a gaffer and a production designer, things are pretty much the same everywhere. You know, you can even if you don't speak the same language, you can communicate shots. But the crews in India, because there's so many people, you know, in the office you might have like 6 or 7 people sitting in the office, and one person feeds the paper into the printer, one person operates the computer, another person takes the paper out of the printer. You know, everybody, just to keep people, give people jobs and keep people working. On the set, it was kind of madness because there were so many crew members. And basically the director of photography there was kind of like commanding the crew. So yeah, every place has its own kind of unique properties, but at the core of it, it's, you know, here's the shot, 2-shot, whatever, you know, like the language of cinema is pretty universal.
And so fast forward to, I guess, more recent times, you have done another movie which was very well received again, Don't Let Her In.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's well received over there, do you think, or where?
I mean,
I don't have a sense yet of what the audience reaction is.
From what I've seen on forums and on Reddit and different places like that, I recently seen somebody review it on Reddit, and they had basically said that you had channeled your inner Roger Corman, and they said the visuals were impressive, film locations, set designs, the decoration looks great, consideration for lighting, that you had quickly demonstrated a keen eye for arranging and capturing some arresting shots, making great use of the space of the setting, and overall just seemed to have like nothing but good things to say. And then there was multiple comments where everybody seemed to be like, you know what, this was like perfect for me. It moved along at a nice pace. It was like perfect.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. Yeah, because I have not seen that. I've seen a few reviews, and, you know, some like it, some were not so happy with it. You know, that film came about. Charlie, you know, called me up, and, you know, we stay in touch and have dinner every once in a while. And you know, he was trying to do, because we're basically planning to do Subspecies number 5, which is going to be like a prequel. We've been planning that for probably 15 years now or so. 20. I wrote the script originally back in the late 90s, probably, and because myself and Denise Duff and Anna Hove kind of don't want to do it unless the scale of the production is big enough. We've been putting it off, and then we were about to do it, and then COVID hit. So I'm hoping we're going to go out and shoot it in the spring in Serbia. But in the meantime, Charlie came up with this idea to do movies like, and I guess because everybody's watching TV series, streaming TV series through the lockdown. He wanted to do little 2-part episodes of movies, like split a 1-hour movie into 2 parts. It was not a very great idea, because I think a half-hour episode is not, 2 half-hour episodes does not make a series, and 2 half-hour episodes combined into 1 hour does not quite make a feature. So it's kind of like a odd hybrid movie. But he said, "Do you want to do one? Submit some ideas." So I submitted some ideas. And one of them was for like a Roommate from Hell. And he liked that idea. And so we went into production on that. I wrote the script, and it originally came out as 2 30-minute episodes, and now they've been combined into a 1 hour. And I set out looking for locations and found this incredible warehouse in downtown Los Angeles. In my mind, the location of the art district of downtown LA, somehow in my mind, 20 years ago, that was like a desolation row of old warehouses, and was kind of a weird and spooky place. But now, when I started scouting locations, all of those weird and spooky places are all gentrified and turned into condominiums, and it's all just horrifyingly civilized down there, except for this one warehouse that stands all by itself, that's still basically as it was in the 1920s. So Charlie managed to secure that as a location. We got through. I wrote the script very simply for, like 3 cast members primarily. We cast it and got 3 really wonderful actors. The cinematographer was, really fast. And the Dave Lowe, the production designer, really, really good. And the movie is like super, super cheap. But, you get a camera, you put a lens on it, you find the perfect kind of 2-shot or whatever. And I have certain ways I like to shoot people, and certain places I like to put the camera, sometimes low, sometimes high. And, you have the location, you have the actors, you can make a movie. And so we did it. It was like 6 days shoot, and kind of went over budget by a half a day. And yeah, I'm glad that people are responding to it, because, in the end, I feel like it turned out pretty good, considering the kind of very low budget and quick nature of shooting. And that was a film that really filled me with terror in the days leading up to start shooting, because if anything, I have certain ambitions, and those ambitions cost time on the set to set a shot up, to make it work. And so the thought of trying to shoot something in 6 days was really, really intimidating to me. But I told the actors, this is really going to be difficult, and you have to help me by knowing your lines and knowing your part perfectly when you come on the set. And they did not disappoint me. They were so on from so we could shoot rehearsals, basically. And Howard Wexler, the DP, was so fast at lighting. So, it was really an exhilarating experience making that film.
How many of those do you think you could potentially do if given the chance, like within, say, a year? Or would you even want to do that faster format again?
Sure, I could do it. I maybe would want 7 days, let's say, just so because the thought of walking onto a set and having to shoot like 10 pages in a day is, okay, you can do that a few days, and some days you got to shoot 12 pages. Whereas, for me, I'm more comfortable shooting maybe 5 pages in a day. But given the opportunity, because to me, there's nothing greater than kind of seeing if you can do it and figuring out a way to make up time in a day. If you get halfway through the day and you go, oh man, I have really blown it. We have this much more to shoot today. figuring out how to do it in one shot and how to do it in a way that doesn't compromise the story. So yeah, for me, it's exhilarating. I could do probably 2 or 3 movies worth in a year of those kind of things. Would be kind of fun to do.
And I guess then on to, you had kind of touched on it a little bit there, bringing us up to current day, I guess. So the 5th installment of Subspecies is greenlit. It's good to go. Everything is basically done, bar obviously, shooting a movie.
Yeah, basically the script is done. I had to kind of take the script that I wrote way back when and trim it down a little bit to make it fit with whatever the budget is that we have to work with. We have some production partners who are kind of hooking us up with a Serbian production team. I have yet to go look at locations in Serbia, but they sent me to Albania like right before COVID, and I scouted locations there because the same team kind of was working on Castle Freak there, and I found the castles to be kind of lacking in like kind of Gothic spectacle, and the city itself to be lacking in kind of neoclassical architecture. I presume because the communists just kind of came in and destroyed everything, or World War II destroyed a lot of stuff. But so Albania turned out to be not the perfect location, but they say Serbia has much better castles and great landscapes, and I've seen a few pictures that seem to bear that out. So yeah, I'm really excited to be able to get back in and to get together with Anna Sove again and Denise Duff and bring that movie to life. And, it's because everybody's a little bit older now. Hopefully we're going to be able to tell this prequel that will kind of examine kind of how Radu went from being kind of this hybrid human supernatural character into becoming the evil vampire that we all love. And so, yeah, it's going to be really interesting experience for us.
When could we, I know it's obviously early days, any ideas on a time frame for when people can expect maybe to see this on their screens?
I think probably, if all goes well and COVID kind of dies down enough, we'll be shooting in March or April, and then editing. So I would imagine by late summer, maybe of 2022, it might be available to see. Okay,
that's a lot sooner than I was going to say, but that's great. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, this happened fast in the Charlie Band world,
Is there anything else you'd like to promote, talk about, anything you've got coming up, or anything you'd like people to support?
Just support the Haitians. and let's end COVID so the world can get back to traveling and rock and roll again, and the world can everybody will heal and can get the right wing out and help her. Other than that, promote, don't let her in, and everybody wait for Subspecies.
Yeah, that's the big one. That's the big one.
Yeah.
Really appreciate the time today. I have one final question before I let you go. And it is, why horror, and what does it mean to you?
I think horror has an appeal that is like so deeply rooted in our imaginations. And because our world is so kind of controlled and predictable, I think the idea of the unpredictable and the idea of something from the other side of reality that can kind of affect us is really appealing. It's like nightmares, like we have nightmares and they terrify us, but in the end, you get to experience something really exciting and you didn't get hurt. I think horror has that same appeal. And, I used to be the kind of person who, if I was walking alone in the dark and get the feeling that there's something behind me, it would literally scare the crap out of me. And I think that's like a really interesting visceral and kind of ancient reaction that we're scared of the dark. And I'm like, also, I've worked on so many horror films that if I go out into nature, like way out into the forest, let's say, if I'm with people, I feel okay. But the minute I'm alone, I am terrified.
Yeah, I get that.
And it's like getting stuck with a psycho killer when you're all by yourself is like terrifying. Or are we more terrified of ourselves? So, or what our imaginations can wreak. So yeah, I think horror has a really important place in storytelling and in the stories that we tell each other.
Yeah, I think more so than it gets credit for, honestly.
Yeah, but I mean, I think horror films, even as other genres come and go, horror is always there, and there's always an audience for it. And some people really don't like that, the emotions that it evokes, but some people like it. And for me, I like it more for the sense of awe that it evokes. I do not like stories of man's cruelty to man, like torture porn movies do nothing for me. And slasher films, I'm not that fond of. But a monster killing you is, for me, that's okay, It's a weird distinction.
Like I said, I appreciate the time today. It's been fantastic to chat, and I hope that when we get closer, or potentially after Subspecies 5 releases, we could do this again.
Yeah, sounds good, Aaron. It's really been fun talking to you.
It's been fun. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Evil wears many masks, but pure horror wears only one. Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise, only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.